The alarm screamed through the corridors of Station Nexus 7, a shrill electronic wail that made every alien on board freeze in terror. Red lights bathed the pristine white walls in an ominous glow as the station's artificial intelligence announced in multiple languages, "Predator alert. Level 5 threat detected. All personnel report to designated safe zones immediately." Commander Zelix, a tall Vorthack with blue-scaled skin and, for arms, rushed through the command center as his crew scrambled at their stations. His species had evolved from prey animals on a death world, and, even after millennia of technological advancement, the ancient instincts still kicked in when predator alarms sounded. His breathing became rapid and shallow, his large eyes darting around the room. "Report," he barked, trying to keep the fear from his voice. Lieutenant Kresh, a spider-like arachnoid with 8 delicate limbs, was frantically manipulating holographic displays. Her movements were jerky and panicked. "Sir, the bioscanners detected massive predator signatures in Section C7. The readings they're unlike anything in our databases." "Impossible," Zelix muttered. Station Nexus 7 was supposed to be the most secure diplomatic outpost in this sector of the galaxy. It hosted representatives from over 40 different species, all members of the Galactic Harmony Coalition. The station's bioscanners were designed to detect any form of aggressive life and sound immediate alerts. What kind of predator could have gotten past our security? Dr. Milhex, the station's chief xenobiologist and a member of the slug-like gastropoid race, slithered over to them. His translator device crackled as he spoke in worried tones. "Commander, the readings suggest something with incredible hunting capabilities. The biomarkers indicate a creature with enhanced reflexes, superior strength, and what appears to be tactical intelligence. The computer is classifying it as an apex predator." The command center's main screen lit up with a detailed schematic of the station. Section C7 pulsed angry red, and moving through it was a yellow dot representing the detected threat. Zelix watched in horror as the dot moved with purpose, not randomly like a confused animal, but with clear direction and intent. "How many casualties?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That's the strange part, sir," Kresh replied, her compound eyes reflecting the red warning lights. "There are no casualties, no distress calls. The predator seems to be moving through populated areas, but no one has reported any attacks." This made no sense to any of them. In their understanding of the galaxy, predators were brutal, instinct-driven creatures that attacked anything they perceived as prey. The fact that this apex predator was moving through the station without leaving a trail of bodies was more terrifying than comforting. It suggested intelligence, planning, perhaps even worse intentions than simple hunger. "Could it be hunting?" Dr. Milhex suggested, his voice trembling through the translator. "Perhaps selecting specific targets?" The thought sent chills through everyone present. The idea of an intelligent predator stalking the station's inhabitants was the stuff of nightmares for species that had evolved from prey animals. "Sir," Kresh called out, "I'm getting reports from Section C7. It's the galley area. The predator seems to be concentrated around the food preparation facilities." Zelix felt his blood run cold. The galley was where many of the station's inhabitants gathered for meals. If the predator was there, it could be preparing for a massive attack. "Evacuate that entire section immediately. Deploy security teams, but keep them at a safe distance. I want visual confirmation of this threat." As the evacuation alerts began blaring through Section C7, the various alien inhabitants panicked. Crystalline silicoids tinkled in terror as they rolled away from the area. Gaseous nebulons quickly shifted their atmospheric forms to fit through ventilation systems, desperately seeking escape routes. The few remaining bird-like aviarians took flight in the corridors, their feathers ruffled with fear. In the command center, they watched the security feed from Section C7. The corridors were emptying rapidly as frightened aliens fled, but the cameras in the galley itself were somehow malfunctioning, showing only static. "The predator must be interfering with our surveillance," Zelix concluded grimly. "It's definitely intelligent. This is a planned attack." Suddenly, one of the security teams reached the galley area. The team leader, a heavily armored Tortillian named Sergeant Krex, established communication with the command center. His species resembled giant turtles and were known for their defensive capabilities, but even his voice carried fear. "Command, we're outside the galley. The doors are sealed, but we can hear sounds from inside." "What kind of sounds?" Zelix demanded. There was a pause before Krex responded. "It sounds like cooking, sir." The command center fell silent. Everyone exchanged confused glances. "Cooking? What kind of predator cooked its prey before consuming it?" "Are you certain, Sergeant?" "Yes, sir. I can hear what sounds like chopping, sizzling, and what might be humming." Dr. Milhex slithered closer to the communication console. "Commander, this behavior doesn't match any known predator patterns. Perhaps we should consider that our bioscanners might be malfunctioning." But Zelix wasn't convinced. He had seen too many horrors in his years of service. "No, Doctor. I think we're dealing with something far worse than a simple predator. This thing is intelligent enough to cook its prey. It might be preparing a feast." The implications were terrifying. An intelligent predator that planned its attacks, that prepared its victims with the calculated precision of a chef preparing a meal, was beyond anything they had encountered before. "Sir, should we attempt to breach the galley?" Sergeant Krex asked over the comm. "Negative." Zelix replied firmly. "Maintain your position. Do not engage until we know more about what we're dealing with." As they waited tensely in the command center, Dr. Milhex was running every analysis he could think of. "Commander, I've been reviewing the bioscanner data. The readings are consistent with a carbon-based life form, bipedal, approximately 6 feet in height. The muscle density readings suggest incredible physical strength, and the neural activity patterns indicate high intelligence." "Any idea what species it might be?" Zelix asked. "Nothing in our databases matches these readings exactly," the doctor replied. "But there are some similarities to a species mentioned in old exploration reports, something called humans from a planet called Earth. But that's impossible. Humans are supposed to be a peaceful species that recently joined the coalition. They're classified as omnivores, not predators." Zelix frowned. He had heard of humans, though he had never encountered one personally. They were supposed to be a newly discovered species from a relatively small planet, recently welcomed into the Galactic Harmony Coalition. The reports described them as curious but harmless, with no significant predatory characteristics. "Are you suggesting that our bioscanners are mistaking a human for an apex predator?" "The readings don't lie, Commander," Dr. Milhex said nervously. "Whatever is in that galley registers as one of the most dangerous predators our sensors have ever detected." Just then, the static on the galley cameras cleared. The main screen showed a figure moving around the kitchen area. It was indeed bipedal, roughly 6 feet tall, with pale skin and dark hair. It wore what appeared to be a white uniform, and was indeed cooking, chopping vegetables with incredible speed and precision. "By the stars," Zelix breathed. "It is a human." They watched in fascination and terror as the human moved through the kitchen with fluid grace. Its movements were economical and precise, every action calculated for maximum efficiency. When it wielded the cooking knives, its motions were so fast they were barely visible to the cameras. The way it handled the sharp implements was both beautiful and terrifying, like watching a master warrior practicing with deadly weapons. "Look at those reflexes," Kresh whispered. "Look at that precision. Our bioscanners aren't wrong. That creature is definitely a predator." The human seemed completely unaware of the chaos it had caused. It continued its work, occasionally humming a tune that the station's audio pickups could barely detect. The sound was melodic, but somehow ominous to the alien ears listening in the command center. "What is it preparing?" Dr. Milhex asked, zooming in on the cooking area. They could see various ingredients laid out on the preparation surfaces. Some appeared to be recognizable vegetables and proteins from the station's food supplies, but the human was combining them in ways none of the aliens had ever seen before. "It's using fire," Kresh observed with horror. "It's actually cooking the food with controlled flames." This was particularly disturbing to many of the species watching. The use of fire for food preparation was associated with the most primitive and dangerous predatory behaviors in their evolutionary understanding. "Commander," came Sergeant Krex's voice over the comm. "What are your orders?" "The creature seems to be concentrating on its food preparation, but those bioreadings are off the charts. Should we evacuate the entire station?" Zelix was torn. Everything they were seeing suggested that they were dealing with an apex predator of unprecedented capability, but its current behavior was completely non-aggressive. Still, the bioscanner readings didn't lie, and he had a responsibility to protect the thousands of inhabitants on the station. Maintain your positions, he finally decided. But be ready for immediate action. If that thing shows any aggressive behavior whatsoever, I want it contained immediately. As they continued to watch, the human finished its preparation and began cooking in earnest. The smells that wafted through the ventilation system were unlike anything the station's inhabitants had ever experienced. To their alien senses, the aromas were intense and overwhelming, triggering primal responses they couldn't quite understand. Those scents, Dr. Milhax said, his voice filled with scientific curiosity despite his fear. They're having physiological effects on the nearby inhabitants. I'm receiving reports of unusual responses from various species throughout the station. Indeed, reports were coming in from all over the station. Aliens who had fled from Section C-7 were experiencing strange sensations. Some reported feeling inexplicably hungry despite having recently eaten. Others described a peculiar warmth spreading through their bodies. A few even mentioned feeling strangely calm and comfortable, despite the ongoing predator alert. It's using chemical warfare, Zelix concluded grimly. The scents are some kind of biological weapon designed to pacify its victims before the attack. This explanation, while terrifying, was the only one that made sense to the command crew. An apex predator that could influence the behavior of multiple species through airborne chemicals was beyond dangerous. It was potentially catastrophic. Should we seal off the ventilation system? Kresh asked. Do it, Zelix ordered. I don't want those chemicals spreading any further through the station. As the ventilation system shut down in Section C-7, the human continued its work, seemingly oblivious to the panic it was causing. It moved between different cooking stations, managing multiple dishes simultaneously with the kind of coordination that spoke to incredible neural processing capabilities. How is it managing so many complex tasks at once? Dr. Milhax wondered aloud. The level of multitasking we're observing suggests cognitive abilities far beyond what we thought possible for humans. Because it's not just a human, Zelix said darkly. It's something much more dangerous than we initially realized. A human that has somehow become an apex predator. The implications were staggering. If humans could evolve or be modified into such dangerous predators, it changed everything they thought they knew about this species and their place in the galaxy. As they watched the figure work in the kitchen, Zelix made a decision that he hoped he wouldn't regret. I'm contacting Coalition Command. This is beyond our capabilities to handle. We need specialists who understand predator psychology and potentially xenobiological warfare. The message went out across the faster-than-light communication networks, carrying with it a warning that would soon ripple through the entire Galactic Harmony Coalition. An apex predator had been discovered among the humans, and it was currently active on one of their most important diplomatic stations. What they didn't know was that they were about to learn something fundamental about humanity that would change their understanding of the galaxy forever. Marcus Chun had been working in the galley of Station Nexus 7 for 3 months, and he loved every minute of it. As the first human chef to work on a major galactic diplomatic station, he felt the weight of responsibility to represent his species well. What he didn't realize was that his simple passion for cooking was currently being interpreted as the actions of a deadly apex predator by the terrified alien crew monitoring him. He hummed quietly to himself as he worked, completely absorbed in preparing what he hoped would be a memorable feast for the station's diverse inhabitants. Tonight was special. It was the anniversary of the Galactic Harmony Coalition's founding, and Marcus wanted to create something that would showcase the best of human cuisine while being respectful of the dietary needs and cultural sensitivities of the various alien species on board. The kitchen was his domain, and he moved through it with the confidence of someone who had spent years perfecting his craft. He had trained at the finest culinary institutes on Earth, worked in restaurants across human space, and had spent months studying the dietary requirements and taste preferences of dozens of alien species before accepting this position. Marcus reached for his knife roll, unfolding it to reveal the collection of perfectly maintained blades that were his most prized possessions. Each knife was crafted by master smiths on Earth, balanced to perfection, and honed to an edge that could split a hair. To him, they were tools of creation, instruments that allowed him to transform raw ingredients into works of art that could bring joy and satisfaction to those who tasted his food. He selected his favorite chef's knife, a 10-inch German steel blade that felt like an extension of his own hand. With practiced efficiency, he began breaking down a large quantity of vegetables that he had specially requested from the station's hydroponics base. The knife moved in a blur as he julienned carrots, diced onions, and chopped herbs with the kind of speed and precision that came from decades of practice. What Marcus didn't know was that every movement was being analyzed by bioscanners that had been designed to detect predatory behavior. To the alien technology, his knife skills looked like a predator's natural weapons being employed with lethal efficiency. The speed of his cuts, the precision of his movements, and the way he handled multiple sharp implements simultaneously registered as the actions of a creature perfectly evolved for killing. He moved to the protein station, where he had arranged various cuts of lab-grown meat that had been synthesized to provide familiar flavors while being safe for the alien digestive systems that would be consuming them. Marcus had spent weeks working with the station's food technicians to create these custom proteins, ensuring that they would provide the amino acids and nutrients that different species required while tasting delicious. With surgical precision, he began portioning the proteins, his knife sliding through the meat with effortless ease. Each cut was perfect, each portion exactly measured. This was the result of years of training. But, to the watching aliens, it looked like a predator efficiently processing its kills with the kind of instinctive skill that spoke to millions of years of evolutionary refinement. As he worked, Marcus began preparing his mise en place, the careful organization of ingredients that was fundamental to professional cooking. He moved between different stations, gathering spices from dozens of worlds, exotic oils that had been imported at great expense, and rare ingredients that had taken months to acquire. His movements were fluid and purposeful, never wasted, always efficient. The bioscanners registered his movements as those of a hunter surveying its territory, marking the positions of potential prey, planning attack routes with tactical precision. The way he moved through the kitchen, checking multiple dishes, monitoring various cooking processes, and maintaining awareness of everything happening around him, looked to the alien observers like a predator maintaining situational awareness while preparing for a coordinated assault. Marcus fired up the cooking surfaces, adjusting flames and heat levels with the kind of intuitive understanding that came from years of experience. The controlled use of fire was another skill that the aliens found deeply disturbing. In their evolutionary understanding, only the most dangerous predators used fire as a tool, and the casual way Marcus wielded it spoke to a level of predatory sophistication that terrified them. He began cooking in earnest, searing proteins in blazing hot pans, the sizzle and smoke filling the air. The Maillard reaction that created the beautiful brown crusts on the meat was a chemical process that Marcus understood intimately. But, to the aliens watching, it looked like a predator using fire to process its kills in ways that would maximize nutritional value and digestibility. The aromas that began filling the galley were unlike anything the station had ever experienced. Marcus was creating layers of flavor that would appeal to the sophisticated palates he was cooking for. He used reduction techniques to concentrate flavors, emulsification to create rich sauces, and fermentation processes to develop complex tastes that would intrigue and delight his alien diners. But those same aromas, when analyzed by the station's atmospheric monitoring systems, registered as complex pheromonal signals. The aliens' bioscanners interpreted them as chemical weapons designed to influence behavior, to make potential prey more docile and compliant. The fact that aliens throughout the station were reporting strange feelings of hunger and comfort only confirmed their worst fears about Marcus's true nature. Marcus tasted everything as he cooked, adjusting seasonings with the kind of precision that came from a lifetime of developing his palate. Each tiny adjustment was calculated to perfect the balance of flavors, to create harmonies of taste that would surprise and delight. His tongue and nose were finely tuned instruments, capable of detecting subtle changes in salt levels, acidity, sweetness, and the complex interactions between different flavor compounds. To the watching aliens, this constant tasting looked like a predator sampling its prey, testing for optimal flavor development, ensuring that its victims would be at peak palatability before consumption. The systematic way he approached each dish, the careful attention to every detail, suggested a level of predatory sophistication that was almost beyond their comprehension. As the cooking progressed, Marcus began plating his dishes. This was where his artistic training really showed. He had studied not just cooking techniques, but also visual presentation, understanding that people ate first with their eyes. Each plate was composed like a work of art, with careful attention to color, texture, and visual balance. He used tweezers to place microgreens with surgical precision, created sauce patterns with the kind of geometric accuracy that spoke to advanced spatial reasoning, and built three-dimensional food sculptures that required both engineering knowledge and aesthetic sensibility. Every element on each plate had been chosen not just for its flavor contribution, but for its visual impact and textural contrast. The aliens watching this display were horrified. What they were seeing looked like a predator arranging its kills in ritualistic patterns, perhaps as part of some complex hunting ceremony or predatory religious practice. The precision and care with which Marcus arranged each element suggested obsessive-compulsive behaviors that they associated with the most dangerous types of predators. Marcus stepped back to admire his work, wiping his hands on his apron with satisfaction. He had created a menu that he was genuinely proud of, dishes that showcased the best techniques he had learned in his career, while being specifically designed to appeal to the diverse tastes and dietary requirements of the station's inhabitants. He hoped that this meal would help bridge cultural divides and show the aliens that humans understood and respected their needs. What he had actually done, from the aliens' perspective, was demonstrate predatory capabilities that far exceeded anything in their databases. The speed, precision, and tactical intelligence they had observed suggested that humans were not the peaceful omnivores they had been classified as, but rather apex predators of unprecedented sophistication. Marcus began cleaning his station, washing his knives and equipment with the same methodical care he had shown in their use. Each blade was cleaned, dried, and returned to its proper place in the knife roll. His movements remained fluid and efficient, even in these mundane tasks, speaking to the kind of muscle memory that comes from endless repetition. As he worked, Marcus hummed a tune his grandmother had taught him years ago, a simple melody that helped him maintain rhythm while working. The tune was comforting to him, a connection to home and family that helped ease the loneliness of being so far from Earth. It was a purely human expression of contentment and satisfaction in work well done. But, to the alien listeners, the humming sounded like some kind of predatory vocalization, perhaps a hunting call or territorial marker. The fact that Marcus continued to make these sounds even while not actively engaged in food preparation suggested that they were an integral part of his predatory behavior patterns. The command center continued to monitor Marcus's every movement, building a profile of what they believed to be one of the most dangerous creatures they had ever encountered. Every innocent action was interpreted through the lens of predatory behavior analysis, every skill viewed as evidence of lethal capability. Dr. Milhex was particularly fascinated by the data streaming in from the bioscanners. Commander, the neural activity patterns are extraordinary. This creature's brain is processing multiple complex tasks simultaneously while maintaining perfect spatial awareness and fine motor control. The cognitive load it's managing would overwhelm most species. And the physical capabilities, Lieutenant Kresh added, her compound eyes reflecting her fear. The reaction times, the precision, the strength measurements, they're all consistent with an apex predator that has been specifically evolved for killing efficiency. Commander Zelix nodded grimly. Everything they were observing confirmed their worst fears about what humans were capable of becoming. This wasn't just a human. This was something that had transcended normal human limitations to become a perfect predatory machine. Sir, Sergeant Krex reported from his position outside the galley. The creature appears to have finished its food preparation. It's beginning to arrange the prepared materials on transport carriers. The security team watched through the galley windows as Marcus loaded his carefully plated dishes on his serving carts, preparing to transport them to the dining areas where the station's inhabitants would gather for the anniversary celebration. To them, it looked like a predator preparing to distribute its prepared kills to its intended victims. This is it, Zelix realized with growing horror. This is the attack we've been waiting for. It's preparing to feed its victims to themselves as part of some elaborate predatory ritual. The idea was so alien, so disturbing to their understanding of predatory behavior, that none of them could quite process it. A predator that prepared its prey with such care and artistry, that turned the act of consumption into a cultural ceremony, was beyond anything they had encountered in their evolutionary history. Should we stop it before it can distribute the prepared materials? Kresh asked, her hands hovering over the security controls. Zelix hesitated. The human hadn't shown any overtly aggressive behavior, but everything they were observing suggested that they were witnessing the preliminary stages of the most sophisticated predatory attack in galactic history. As Marcus began pushing the first serving cart toward the galley doors, completely unaware of the armed security team waiting outside or the panic that had consumed the station's command structure, Zelix made his decision. All units, prepare for immediate intervention. We cannot allow this creature to complete whatever it's planning. The galley doors hissed open, and Marcus Chen stepped into the corridor, pushing a cart loaded with carefully prepared dishes. He was looking forward to seeing the reactions of the various alien species to his anniversary feast. Each dish had been crafted with specific dietary needs in mind, and he had spent weeks researching flavor preferences and cultural food traditions of the different species aboard the station. What greeted him was the last thing he had expected. A full security team in combat armor was positioned in the corridor, weapons drawn, and trained directly on him. The lead figure, a massive turtle-like creature he recognized as Sergeant Krex, held what appeared to be some kind of energy weapon that was humming with barely contained power. Behind the sergeant, other security officers representing various species all had their weapons aimed at Marcus with expressions that could only be described as terrified determination. Freeze! Sergeant Krex commanded through his translator device, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of military training. Do not make any sudden movements. Marcus stopped instantly, his hands instinctively moving away from the cart as confusion washed over his face. Sergeant Krex? What's going on? Is there some kind of emergency? The question seemed to agitate the security team further. Several of them tightened their grips on their weapons, and Marcus could hear the whining of power cells charging up to higher levels. Identify yourself and your intentions, Krex demanded, taking a step closer while maintaining his weapon's targeting solution on Marcus's center mass. I'm Marcus Chun, the head chef for the station, Marcus replied slowly, genuinely bewildered by what was happening. I'm preparing to serve the anniversary dinner for tonight's celebration. These are the dishes I've been working on for the past several hours. The mention of the dishes caused visible panic among the security team. Several of them exchanged fearful glances, and Marcus could hear whispered conversations in various alien languages, none of which sounded particularly reassuring. Step away from the materials, Sergeant Krex ordered. Move slowly, and keep your hands where we can see them. Marcus complied, taking several steps back from the serving cart while raising his hands. His mind was racing, trying to understand what could possibly have caused this reaction. Had he violated some cultural taboo he wasn't aware of? Had there been some kind of security breach that he had missed while working in the kitchen? Sergeant, can you please tell me what I'm supposed to have done? Marcus asked, his voice carrying genuine confusion and concern. If I've made some kind of mistake, I'd like to understand so I can correct it. This reasonable response seemed to disturb the security team even more. Sergeant Krex's species had evolved from prey animals, and, in their evolutionary understanding, predators didn't engage in rational conversation with their intended victims. The fact that this apparent apex predator was speaking calmly and reasonably was somehow more terrifying than if it had been snarling and threatening them. The bioscanners have identified you as an apex predator, Krex explained, trying to keep the fear from his voice. Your activities in the galley have been monitored, and your behavioral patterns match those of an extremely dangerous hunting entity. Marcus stared at him in complete bewilderment. A predator? Sergeant, I'm a chef. I cook food for people. I've never hurt anyone in my life. The evidence suggests otherwise, came a new voice over the security team's communication system. Commander Zelix was speaking directly from the command center, where he and his staff were monitoring the situation through security cameras and bioscanners. Your physical capabilities, your use of edged weapons, your manipulation of fire, and your deployment of chemical agents all indicate predatory behavior of the highest order. Marcus listened to this with growing astonishment. Edged weapons? You mean my kitchen knives? And chemical agents? Commander, with all due respect, I think there's been some kind of serious misunderstanding here. But his protests only seemed to make things worse. In the command center, Dr. Milhex was analyzing Marcus's speech patterns and vocal stress indicators. Commander, the creature is showing no signs of deception. It genuinely seems to believe what it's saying. This suggests either an extremely sophisticated psychological camouflage system or possibly some form of dissociative predatory conditioning. The idea that Marcus might not even be consciously aware of his own predatory nature was somehow more disturbing than if he had been obviously malicious. It suggested predatory capabilities so advanced that they operated below the level of conscious awareness. Sir, Lieutenant Kresh added from her position at the bioscanner station, the readings are still off the charts. Whatever this creature is, it represents a clear and present danger to everyone on this station. Marcus could hear parts of the conversation through the security team's open communication channels, and he was beginning to understand just how serious this misunderstanding was. These aliens genuinely believed he was some kind of dangerous predator, and their fear was real and immediate. Look, Marcus said, trying to project as much calm and non-threatening energy as possible. I understand that you're concerned about something. But I think if you just look at what I've actually been doing, you'll see that there's been a mistake. He gestured slowly toward the serving cart. These are dinner preparations for tonight's anniversary celebration. Each dish has been specifically designed to be safe and appealing to the various species on board. I've spent months researching dietary requirements and cultural preferences to make sure everything would be appropriate. Sergeant Krex approached the cart cautiously, his weapon still trained on Marcus. The other security officers maintained their positions, creating a crossfire pattern that would allow them to neutralize the threat quickly if it made any aggressive moves. When Krex looked at the carefully plated dishes, what he saw didn't ease his fears. The precision of the presentation, the artistic arrangement of each element, the obvious care that had gone into every detail. All of this suggested a level of predatory sophistication that was beyond anything in their experience. These preparations, Krex said carefully. What is their intended function? Their food, Marcus replied, still completely baffled by the entire situation. They're meant to be eaten. Each dish has been designed to provide proper nutrition while tasting good to the species it's intended for. The security team exchanged horrified glances. The creature was openly admitting that it had prepared these materials to be consumed by the station's inhabitants. This was exactly the kind of predatory behavior they had been fearing. And the chemical compounds we detected? Commander Zelix asked over the comm, the airborne substances that have been affecting personnel throughout the station? Marcus thought for a moment. You mean the aromas from the cooking? Well, yes, cooking does release various scent compounds. That's part of how flavor works. Smell contributes significantly to taste perception. I was trying to create appealing aromas that would make the food more appetizing. To the aliens listening, this sounded like confirmation of their worst fears. The creature was openly admitting to using chemical warfare to influence the behavior of its intended victims, making them more susceptible to whatever it was planning. The rapid movements we observed, Dr. Milhex added from the command center. The manipulation of multiple sharp implements with superhuman speed and precision. I'm a professional chef, Marcus explained patiently. Knife skills are fundamental to the job. I've been training for years to work efficiently and safely with kitchen equipment. The faster and more precisely I can work, the better quality food I can produce. Each explanation that Marcus offered only seemed to reinforce their fears about his predatory nature. Everything he described sounded like the advanced hunting techniques of an apex predator that had evolved beyond simple instinct into sophisticated tactical planning. And the use of fire? Sergeant Krex asked, his voice carrying the kind of fear that spoke to millions of years of evolutionary conditioning. "For cooking," Marcus replied, beginning to sound a bit frustrated despite his efforts to remain calm. "Heat transforms food, makes it more digestible, develops flavors through chemical reactions. Humans have been cooking with fire for hundreds of thousands of years. It's one of the things that helped us evolve into an intelligent species. Can I at least make sure the food doesn't spoil while we wait?" he asked. "Some of these dishes are time-sensitive, and if they sit out too long, they'll lose their optimal flavor and texture." The request to return to the galley caused immediate alarm among the security team. The idea of allowing this apex predator to return to what they perceived as its hunting ground was unthinkable. "Absolutely not," Sergeant Krex replied firmly. "You will remain here until the situation can be resolved." Marcus nodded reluctantly. "All right, but could someone at least move the cart back into the galley and put the perishable items into refrigeration? I hate to see good food go to waste." Even this simple request was viewed with suspicion. The aliens couldn't understand why an apex predator would be concerned about the preservation of its prepared prey materials unless it was planning some kind of delayed consumption strategy. As they waited for the human diplomatic representatives to arrive, word of the situation began spreading throughout the station. The news that an apex predator had been discovered among the humans sent shockwaves through the alien community. Many species began questioning everything they thought they knew about humanity and their place in the galactic community. The various alien inhabitants gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones about what this revelation might mean. If humans were capable of producing apex predators of such sophistication, what did that say about their true nature? Were they all potential threats, or was this individual some kind of aberration? Dr. Milhex was particularly disturbed by the implications. As a xenobiologist, he had been part of the team that had initially classified humans as peaceful omnivores suitable for integration into the Galactic Harmony Coalition. The idea that he might have made such a fundamental error in species classification was keeping him awake at night. "Commander," he said over the communication system, "if this individual represents typical human predatory capabilities, we may need to completely reassess humanity's classification within the coalition." The thought sent chills through everyone listening. If humans were actually a species of apex predators masquerading as peaceful omnivores, the implications for galactic security were staggering. How many other humans were currently serving in positions throughout coalition space? How many potential threats were already in place, waiting for some unknown signal to activate their predatory programming? Meanwhile, Marcus continued to stand in the corridor under guard, watching his carefully prepared anniversary feast slowly deteriorating on the serving cart. He was beginning to understand that this was more than just a simple misunderstanding. This was a fundamental clash between two completely different ways of understanding the world. To him, cooking was an art form, a way of bringing people together, a method of showing care and hospitality. To the aliens watching him, those same actions looked like the sophisticated hunting behaviors of a creature evolved for maximum killing efficiency. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, someone who had dedicated his life to nurturing people through food, being perceived as the most dangerous threat these aliens had ever encountered. It would have been funny if the situation wasn't so serious. As the standoff continued, both sides waited anxiously for the arrival of human representatives who might be able to bridge the gap between these two radically different perspectives. But even as they waited, neither side could shake the feeling that this incident was going to change everything about how humans and aliens understood each other in the galaxy. The tension on Station Nexus 7 was thick enough to cut with a knife as everyone waited for the human diplomatic mission to arrive. Marcus stood in the corridor under heavy guard, watching his anniversary feast slowly deteriorating on the serving cart, while the alien crew struggled to understand what they were dealing with. 3 hours after the initial alarm, the diplomatic shuttle finally docked with the station. Ambassador Sarah Martinez, a veteran diplomat with over 20 years of experience in interspecies relations, stepped onto the station along with Dr. James Wright, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, and Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a military advisor specializing in interspecies security protocols. Ambassador Martinez had been briefed during the journey, but nothing could have prepared her for the level of fear and confusion that greeted her upon arrival. Commander Zelix met them at the docking bay, his four arms gesturing nervously as he tried to explain the situation. "Ambassador, thank you for coming so quickly," Zelix began, his translator device struggling to convey the complexity of his emotional state. "We have a situation that could have serious implications for human-alien relations throughout the coalition. I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding involving one of our citizens," Ambassador Martinez replied diplomatically. "Perhaps you could walk me through what's happened." As they made their way through the station corridors, Commander Zelix explained the sequence of events that had led to the current crisis. He described the predator alerts, the bioscanner readings, the observed behaviors that had convinced them they were dealing with an apex predator of unprecedented sophistication. Dr. Wright listened with growing amazement as the alien commander described Marcus's knife skills, his use of fire, his manipulation of chemical compounds, and his apparent preparation of prey materials for distribution to potential victims. When they reached the corridor where Marcus was still under guard, Wright had to suppress a smile as he realized what had actually happened. "Ambassador," Marcus said with evident relief when he saw the human diplomatic team, "am I glad to see you. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding here." "So I'm beginning to understand," Ambassador Martinez replied, taking in the scene before her. The heavily armed security team, the serving cart full of carefully plated food, and Marcus standing calmly in the middle of it all with his hands still raised. "Mr. Chun, isn't it? The station's head chef?" "That's right," Marcus confirmed. "I was just trying to prepare a special anniversary dinner for the station's inhabitants when all of this happened. Apparently, the bioscanners classified me as some kind of dangerous predator." Dr. Wright approached Sergeant Krex and the security team. "Sergeant, may I examine the bioscanner readings that led to this classification?" Krex hesitated, but Commander Zelix nodded his approval. Dr. Wright was provided with a portable display showing the raw data that had triggered the predator alerts. As he reviewed the information, his expression shifted from professional interest to barely contained amusement. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying the readings. "These scanners are remarkably sophisticated. They're detecting and analyzing everything from neural activity patterns to muscle density to stress hormone levels. And they clearly identify this individual as an apex predator," Dr. Milhex interjected, slithering over to join the conversation. "The readings are unambiguous." "Oh, the readings are absolutely accurate," Dr. Wright agreed, which caused visible surprise among the alien observers. "The problem isn't with your sensors, it's with your interpretation of the data." He turned to address the assembled aliens, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining a complex scientific concept to students. "You see, you're making assumptions about human behavior based on your own evolutionary experiences. But humans evolved very differently than most of the species in the coalition." Ambassador Martinez stepped forward to support her colleague's explanation. "Dr. Wright, perhaps you could help our friends understand what makes humans unique in this context." "Certainly," Wright replied, warming to his subject. "Most species in the galaxy evolved from prey animals, creatures that survived by avoiding predators, by being cautious, by developing sophisticated early warning systems for danger. Your bioscanners and your behavioral analysis protocols were designed with this evolutionary background in mind." He gestured toward Marcus, who was listening with interest to this explanation of his own species. "Humans, on the other hand, evolved from persistence hunters. We're one of the very few sapient species in the galaxy that developed intelligence as a predatory adaptation rather than as a defense mechanism." The implications of this statement sent ripples of unease through the alien observers. Sergeant Krex tightened his grip on his weapon, while Dr. Milhex made nervous clicking sounds with his translator device. "Now, before anyone panics," Dr. Wright continued quickly, "this doesn't mean humans are dangerous to other sapient species. Our predatory adaptations were specifically evolved for hunting non-sapient prey on our home world. We developed persistence hunting techniques that allowed us to run down prey animals over long distances. But we also developed the social cooperation and communication skills necessary for pack hunting." He pointed to the serving cart that had caused so much alarm. "What Mr. Chun has been doing here is actually a perfect example of those evolved behaviors being channeled into completely peaceful purposes. The knife skills that your scanners interpreted as weapon proficiency, they're actually a development of the fine motor control that humans needed for tool use and food preparation. The multitasking abilities, those come from our need to coordinate complex group hunting strategies. Ambassador Martinez added, and the use of fire for cooking is one of humanity's oldest technologies. It's not a predatory weapon. It's a tool that helped us evolve into the species we are today. Cooking food with fire allowed our ancestors to extract more nutrition from their meals, which provided the energy needed for our brains to grow larger and more complex. Dr. Milhex was frantically taking notes as the humans explained their species' evolutionary background. But the chemical compounds, he protested. The substances that were affecting personnel throughout the station. Surely those represent some form of predatory manipulation? Dr. Wright chuckled. Humans are capable of extraordinary precision and multitasking when we're engaged in activities we're passionate about. Marcus finally lowered his hands as the security team began to relax slightly. If I may, he said diplomatically, I think I understand what happened here. Your bioscanners are designed to detect predatory behavior, but they can't distinguish between predatory hunting and human food preparation because both activities use similar physical and mental capabilities. Exactly, Dr. Wright confirmed. It's like using a tool designed to detect warfare and then being surprised when it identifies a human chess master as a military strategist. The underlying cognitive processes are similar, but the application and intent are completely different. Ambassador Martinez saw an opportunity to turn this crisis into a learning experience. Commander Zelix, this actually presents us with a valuable opportunity. Would you be willing to allow Mr. Chun to demonstrate human cooking techniques while your bioscanners monitor him? It might help your scientists understand how to better distinguish between actual threats and normal human activities. Commander Zelix was clearly torn between his scientific curiosity and his responsibility for station security. After a moment of internal struggle, he nodded slowly. Dr. Milhex, what is your opinion of this proposal from a research perspective? The xenobiologist was practically vibrating with excitement. Commander, this could provide unprecedented insight into human behavioral patterns. If we can learn to properly interpret human biosignatures, it would be invaluable for future interactions with their species. Very well, Zelix decided. But I want full security protocols maintained. If there's any indication of actual predatory behavior, we terminate the demonstration immediately. Marcus looked at the serving cart full of food that had been sitting out for hours. Well, those dishes are probably beyond saving at this point, but I could start fresh. Would you like me to prepare something simple that everyone can watch and understand? What would you suggest? Ambassador Martinez asked, recognizing the diplomatic value of this demonstration. Marcus thought for a moment. How about something basic but impressive? I could make fresh pasta with a simple sauce. It involves most of the techniques that seem to have caused concern: knife work, use of fire, multitasking, chemical transformations, but it's straightforward enough that everyone can follow what's happening and why. Dr. Wright nodded approvingly. That sounds perfect. It'll demonstrate human cooking techniques while showing that the end result is genuinely intended for consumption by others. As the group made its way back to the galley, word spread throughout the station that the crisis was being resolved and that the human would be demonstrating his activities under controlled conditions. Many of the alien inhabitants gathered in areas where they could observe through the galley windows, their scientific curiosity overcoming their earlier fears. In the galley, Marcus began setting up for his demonstration, explaining each step to the watching aliens. First, I'm going to make fresh pasta dough. This requires precise measurements and specific techniques to achieve the right texture. He began assembling ingredients: flour, eggs, olive oil, salt, measuring each component with practiced accuracy. The bioscanners registered this as tactical preparation, but now the observers understood that they were watching food preparation rather than the preliminary stages of an attack. The knife work you observed earlier is essential for creating uniform pieces that cook evenly, Marcus explained as he began dicing onions for the sauce. His blade moved in the same lightning-fast pattern that had terrified the aliens earlier, but now they could see it in context as a culinary skill rather than weapons training. As he worked, Dr. Wright provided commentary for the alien observers. Notice how Mr. Chin's movements are precise, but not aggressive. He's using the minimum force necessary to accomplish each task, which is actually the opposite of predatory behavior. A true predator would use overwhelming force to ensure the kill. Marcus began kneading the pasta dough, his hands working the mixture with the kind of rhythmic precision that came from years of practice. This process develops the gluten structure in the flour, he explained. It's what gives the pasta its proper texture when cooked. The watching aliens observed as Marcus transformed simple ingredients into something completely different through the application of technique, timing, and understanding of chemical processes. What had earlier looked like predatory food preparation now revealed itself as a form of applied science combined with artistic expression. The fire you were concerned about, Marcus continued, lighting the burner under a pan, is just a controlled heat source. Cooking is essentially a series of controlled chemical reactions that transform raw ingredients into more digestible and flavorful forms. As the demonstration continued, the alien observers began to understand not just what Marcus was doing, but why humans had developed these particular skills. They saw how cooking represented an intersection of human intelligence, creativity, and social cooperation, all channeled toward the goal of creating something that would nourish and please others. The crisis that had begun with fear and misunderstanding was transforming into an opportunity for genuine cross-cultural learning and appreciation. As Marcus worked through his pasta demonstration, something remarkable began to happen throughout Station Nexus 7. The same aromas that had earlier been interpreted as chemical weapons began to work their magic in an entirely different way. Aliens who had fled in terror hours earlier found themselves drawn back toward the galley, their curiosity overcoming their fear. Dr. Milhex was the first to notice the physiological changes in his fellow observers. Fascinating, he murmured, studying his readings. The chemical compounds are indeed having an effect on the station's inhabitants, but not in the way we initially interpreted. Commander Zelix looked up from his own observations. What do you mean, Doctor? The responses we're seeing, Milhex explained, his voice filled with scientific wonder. They're not signs of chemical manipulation or predatory influence. They're expressions of anticipation, pleasure. The scents are triggering positive emotional responses across multiple species. As Marcus rolled out the pasta dough with practiced efficiency, he continued his explanation for the fascinated alien audience. Cooking is as much about engaging the senses as it is about nutrition. The visual presentation, the textures, the aromas, they all work together to create an experience that goes beyond simple sustenance. Ambassador Martinez watched the crowd of alien observers growing larger as word spread throughout the station. You know, she said quietly to Dr. Wright, this might turn out to be one of the most important diplomatic events in human-alien relations. Dr. Wright nodded, equally impressed by what he was witnessing. Look at them, he said, gesturing to the various species pressed against the galley windows. They're not afraid anymore. They're intrigued. Marcus is showing them something they've never experienced before. The idea that food preparation can be an art form, a way of expressing care for others. In the galley, Marcus had moved on to preparing his sauce. He heated olive oil in a pan, adding the diced onions he had prepared earlier. The sizzling sound filled the air, and he explained each step as he worked. The browning process creates new flavor compounds through what we call the Maillard reaction, he said, stirring the onions with practiced movements. It's a chemical transformation that occurs when proteins and sugars are heated together. This is why cooked food often tastes very different from raw ingredients. Sergeant Krex, who had been maintaining security throughout the demonstration, found himself leaning forward with interest. The creature, the human, he understands the chemical processes at a molecular level? Absolutely, Dr. Wright replied. Human chefs study food science extensively. They understand not just how to cook, but why different techniques produce specific results. It's applied chemistry, biology, and physics all rolled into one discipline. Marcus added garlic to the pan, and the aroma that rose from the sizzling mixture caused a visible reaction throughout the watching crowd. Several species made sounds of appreciation that their translator devices struggled to interpret. This is extraordinary, whispered a crystalline silicoid observer. their body chiming softly with what could only be described as pleasure. The chemical signatures are creating harmonious resonances in my mineral matrix. A nearby aviarian representative ruffled her feathers in agreement. The aromatic compounds are triggering neural pathways I didn't even know I had. It's like music for the olfactory system. Marcus began seasoning his sauce, adding herbs and spices with the precision of a master chemist. Each addition was carefully measured and timed, creating layers of flavor that would complement the pasta he was preparing. Seasoning is perhaps the most complex aspect of cooking, he explained to his audience. Different compounds interact in ways that can enhance, mask, or completely transform flavors. Understanding these interactions allows a chef to create harmony among ingredients that might seem incompatible. Dr. Milhex was frantically recording everything, his scientific instruments detecting chemical combinations that he had never encountered before. The molecular diversity is astounding, he reported to Commander Zelix. This single preparation involves hundreds of distinct chemical compounds interacting in precisely controlled ratios. As Marcus began cooking his fresh pasta in boiling water, he demonstrated the importance of timing and technique. Pasta needs to be cooked until it reaches what we call al dente, firm to the bite. This requires understanding how heat affects the protein and starch structures in the wheat. The watching aliens observed as he tested the pasta's doneness, tasting small samples and adjusting the cooking time accordingly. What had earlier looked like predatory sampling behavior now revealed itself as quality control based on sensory evaluation. The tasting process, Ambassador Martinez explained to the alien observers, is how human chefs ensure that their food meets their standards. It's not about consumption. It's about refinement and perfection of the final product. When the pasta was ready, Marcus demonstrated the final assembly process, combining the cooked noodles with his aromatic sauce, adding fresh herbs, and a sprinkle of cheese that he had prepared earlier. The final dish was a perfect harmony of colors, textures, and aromas that created a sensory experience unlike anything the aliens had ever witnessed. And now, Marcus said with a smile, the most important part of cooking, sharing it with others. He began plating individual portions, his movements displaying the same artistic precision that had earlier been interpreted as ritualistic predatory behavior. Each plate was composed with careful attention to visual appeal, creating miniature works of art that were meant to be consumed. Would anyone like to try some? Marcus asked, looking around at the crowd of alien observers. The request created a moment of tense silence. These were species that had evolved as prey animals, being invited to consume something prepared by what their bioscanners still registered as an apex predator. It went against every instinctual warning system they possessed. Commander Zelix was the first to step forward. As the ranking officer, he felt it was his responsibility to ensure the safety of his crew, even if it meant putting himself at risk. I will try it, he announced, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. Marcus handed him a plate with an encouraging smile. I hope you enjoy it, Commander. I tried to keep the seasonings mild since I wasn't sure about Vorthack taste preferences. Zelix accepted the plate with all four of his arms, studying the arrangement of food with intense curiosity. The pasta was perfectly cooked, the sauce glistened with olive oil and herbs, and the overall presentation was undeniably appealing to his visual senses. He took a small bite, and his expression immediately transformed. The flavors were unlike anything he had ever experienced, complex, layered, satisfying in ways that his species' traditional food preparations had never achieved. The chemical compounds that Marcus had so carefully balanced were interacting with his taste receptors in patterns that triggered pleasure responses throughout his nervous system. Zelix began, then paused to take another bite. This is extraordinary. The flavor complexity is unlike anything in our culinary traditions. His reaction encouraged others to try the dish. Dr. Milhex was next, followed by Sergeant Krex, then, gradually more and more of the alien observers. Each species experienced the food differently based on their unique physiology, but all reported sensations that could only be described as pleasurable. The human isn't just preparing nutrition, realized Dr. Milhex as he analyzed his own physiological responses to the food. He's creating experiences. He's using his understanding of chemistry and biology to generate specific emotional and sensory responses in other species. It's not predatory behavior at all, Sergeant Krex added, his earlier fear replaced by wonder. It's the exact opposite. It's a form of interspecies communication that we've never encountered before. As word spread throughout the station about what was happening in the galley, more and more inhabitants arrived to witness the demonstration. Species that had been hiding in their quarters since the predator alert sounded began cautiously approaching to see what was causing such excitement. Marcus, delighted by the positive response to his food, began preparing additional portions. "If you'd like, I could show you how to make some simple versions of this dish," he offered. Cooking is something that can be learned and adapted to different tastes and dietary needs. The offer to share knowledge rather than simply provide prepared food was met with tremendous enthusiasm. The aliens began to understand that this was more than just food preparation. It was a form of cultural exchange, a way of sharing part of human civilization with other species. Ambassador Martinez watched the scene with deep satisfaction. What had begun as a potential diplomatic crisis had transformed into something unprecedented, genuine cultural sharing based on mutual understanding and appreciation. "Dr. Wright," she said quietly, "I think we're witnessing something historic here. This could change how humans and aliens interact throughout the galaxy." Dr. Wright nodded, equally moved by what he was observing. "Marcus has accomplished something that years of formal diplomacy couldn't achieve. He's shown our alien friends that humans aren't threats to be feared, but partners who can enrich their lives in ways they never imagined." As the impromptu cooking lesson continued, with aliens eagerly asking questions about ingredients, techniques, and flavor combinations, Station Nexus 7 transformed from a place of fear and suspicion into a center of cultural exchange and learning. The bioscanners still registered Marcus as an apex predator, and, in a sense, they weren't wrong. Humans were predators, but they were predators who had evolved beyond simple hunting into something far more sophisticated. They had become predators of knowledge, of experience, of beauty, and creativity. They hunted not to destroy, but to create, to share, to build connections across the vast distances between species. In the months that followed, news of the cooking incident at Station Nexus 7 spread throughout the Galactic Harmony Coalition. Human chefs became some of the most sought-after cultural ambassadors in the galaxy, and cooking schools began offering interspecies culinary programs. The bioscanner protocols were updated to better distinguish between predatory hunting behaviors and human creative activities, but, more importantly, the incident led to a fundamental shift in how aliens understood humanity's place in the galactic community. Humans weren't just another member species of the Coalition. They were something unique, something that could enrich the lives of other species in ways that had never been imagined. They were predators, yes, but predators who hunted for beauty, for flavor, for the joy of creating experiences that could bring different species together in appreciation and wonder. And Marcus Chun, the chef who had accidentally terrified an entire space station with his culinary skills, became known throughout the galaxy as the human who had taught the stars to taste.